My dad lifted his glass at my sister's wedding reception, lights glimmering off the crystal like they were applauding him before he even spoke, and said loud enough for the chandelier to vibrate, "Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space." The room reacted with uncomfortable laughter, that polite kind of fear disguised as humor, the kind that says we all heard it but no one will admit it. My mother didn't even flinch, just kept her perfect smile carved into place like it had been rehearsed. Brielle leaned into her new husband and pretended it wasn't directed at me. I sat there, the spotlight burning on my skin even though no light touched me, feeling every eye flick toward me and away just as fast. That's how it always was, see me, but don't you dare acknowledge me. I raised my own glass and smiled with a calm I didn't actually possess and said, clear enough for that chandelier to remember forever, good thing I just signed a lease for a place 2,000 miles away. You'll never have to worry about me taking up any space again. The laughter died instantly. Even the music seemed to choke. I set my champagne down untouched, stood up in my thrift store heels, and walked out the doors into air that finally didn't taste like expectations. That was the night they tried to toast their dominance over my existence, and instead, they poured gasoline on my decision to leave. Back at the hotel, the scent of lilies clung to my dress like the humiliation stuck to my ribs. I replayed his words again and again, trying to figure out the exact moment a father could look at his child and see nothing but clutter. The next morning, I returned home to the same gray house with the same manicured lawn and the same kitchen light that never turned off, but everything felt different because now I knew exactly where I stood, beneath them, where they believed I belonged. Dad sat at the dining table, eyes locked on a spreadsheet like it was more worthy of attention than his daughter. Without looking up, he said, "That exit you made last night? Immature." My mother poured coffee and added, "You embarrassed yourself, not us." That was their superpower, cruelty recast as concern. I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, trophies collecting dust, reminders of every attempt I ever made to earn pride that was never mine to win. I stared at my own reflection and realized something sharp and cold: they didn't ignore me by accident. They ignored me because it kept their world neatly arranged. That was the moment I knew I wasn't staying. I wasn't shrinking back into their picture-perfect narrative ever again. Because taking up space wasn't the problem, but proving they couldn't control it anymore? That was going to burn. Back home, the silence after the wedding echoed louder than the microphone my dad used to humiliate me. It was as if the walls themselves had heard him call me worthless and were now waiting to see if I'd agree. Gerald went back to his spreadsheets like nothing worth acknowledgement had occurred. Sophia hummed while slicing fruit as if cruelty was just another item on the menu, and I tried to breathe around the reminder that love in this house was rationed carefully, and I never qualified for a serving. Brielle texted me heart emojis from her honeymoon, pretending she didn't laugh along with everyone else. She'd always been the good one in their eyes, even when she failed classes or maxed out 3 credit cards they secretly paid off. Her mistakes were quirks. Mine were character flaws. I didn't confront them. I learned long ago in this family confrontation isn't allowed unless they initiate it. So instead, I created a new routine, one they didn't know about. In the mornings, I applied for jobs in cities far enough that plane tickets would make guilt trips expensive. In the afternoons, I sold anything that wasn't part of my future: childhood books, dresses I hated wearing, the camera they gave me only to criticize every photo I took. Every dollar went into a private account labeled air. Breathing money. Hope money. Escape money. One night, Dad called me downstairs with that casual authority he liked to wield. "Your mother says you've been distant," he said without looking up from his laptop. "Don't turn a joke into trauma." Joke. My existence, a punchline. I didn't argue. Arguments are participation, and I was done performing. Later, my phone buzzed. Lucas, my closest friend, the only person who ever saw me instead of through me. "You okay?" he asked. I typed I'm fine, even though fine is what people say when they're trying not to shatter. After midnight, the house creaked the way old houses do when they hold secrets too long. I opened my laptop and built a spreadsheet titled Exit Plan, Dates, Goals, Budget, Interviews. My life becoming math. Manageable. Real. The first step, Portland. A job posting that looked like it had been written just for me, creative strategist, remote friendly, decent pay, growth potential. A future. I applied before I could talk myself out of it. When I clicked submit, my hands shook, not from fear, but from the electric thrill of possibility. Outside my window, the streetlight flickered like a sign. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe the universe wasn't laughing at me, maybe it was cheering quietly. And that terrified my parents more than disappointment ever could. Because the moment they saw I was serious about leaving, they planned a trap to make sure I never did. A week after I submitted my application, the house started acting strange, doors left slightly open, hushed whispers that stopped the second I entered the room, and my mother hovering like she could smell independence forming on my skin. Sophia asked fake casual questions like, "Would you ever leave us? And what's even out there for you?" As if fear might convince me that the world beyond this town was too big for someone like me. Gerald watched me the way a person watches their wallet in a crowded room, paranoid, possessive. I didn't give them answers. Silence was my rebellion. Then Brielle called. Her voice was small, raw, the version of her nobody saw. "He left," she whispered, meaning her brand new husband. "He said he needs space." Funny how people who have always been given the world want more of it the moment life expects something back. She begged me to come help her pack up her apartment before she moved back home. I wanted to say no. I wanted to let her learn what standing alone felt like. But that's the problem with big sisters, we keep showing up for people who vanish when we need them. So I helped her fold wedding gifts she'd barely unwrapped, and we shoved her picture-perfect life into cardboard boxes. As we worked, she looked at me with a confession trembling behind her lips. "You were right to leave," she said quietly. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever get. When we returned to our parents' house, Sophia hugged Brielle like a hero returning from war, while I stood behind her carrying half the boxes and none of the praise. The imbalance was laughable. That night, a calendar notification popped up on my phone, interview in 4 days. My pulse jumped. This was my out. But that joy lasted exactly 11 hours. Because the next morning, right as I poured cereal into a chipped bowl, Mom said, "Family dinner Sunday. You'll be there." It wasn't a question. Their voices were too smooth, too sweet, rehearsed. A setup disguised as love. I checked my laptop later and discovered something that made my blood thunder. They had gone through my files. The screen was still open to my folder titled Exit Plan. My stomach flipped. They hadn't asked permission. They never did. But this time, it wasn't just control. It was sabotage. If I didn't show up to this dinner, I'd never hear the end of it. If I did, they'd try to trap me into staying, guilt, manipulation, pressure. I wasn't walking into a meal. I was walking into a negotiation where my freedom was the sacrifice. So I went to that dinner anyway, not knowing they'd bring weapons I never saw coming. Sunday arrived with a suffocating stillness, the kind that feels like the air itself is bracing for a collision. I walked into the dining room right at 6 p.m., because if I showed up even a minute late, they'd twist it into proof I was unreliable. The table was set like a magazine cover, expensive candles, cloth napkins, matching plates, everything perfect except the people sitting there. Gerald scrolled his phone, pretending he didn't care I had arrived. Sophia poured wine into glasses that had never been used for celebration, only control. Brielle sat stiffly, eyes flicking between them like someone waiting for the guns to be drawn. I sat. No one spoke. For a moment, the only sound was the faint clink of silverware, like we were all scared to be the first to break the surface. Then my father started without looking up. "We heard you applied for jobs out west." He said it like a crime. I kept my voice neutral. "Yes. I have an interview." My mother put on a smile so artificial it might as well have been glued. "Why would you abandon your family just because you're upset over one silly comment?" Silly. Public humiliation downgraded to a joke. I stared at them, letting silence make them uncomfortable for once. If I leave, I said finally, it's because staying here is killing me. That's when it happened. The slip. The truth they usually conceal behind manners. Gerald looked directly at me for the first time since the wedding and said, "You should be grateful we kept you here this long." The room froze. He realized he'd said too much, but the damage was already done. Brielle whispered, "Dad," trying to soften his exposure, but it was useless. He got louder. "You cost us more than you ever gave. We can't watch you run into another failure." Failure. That word punched the breath out of my lungs. I stood up slowly. "I am not your investment," I said. "You don't get returns on raising a child." Sophia tried to reach for my hand, that faux sympathy she wore like jewelry. "We just want what's best for you." "No," I said, stepping back. "You want what's easiest for you." Their faces twisted, not with sorrow but with fear that I wasn't bending anymore. "Sit down," Dad commanded, like I was still small enough to be molded. I took my coat instead. As I reached the doorway, my mother hissed, "Don't you turn your back on us." I looked over my shoulder and said, "You turned your back first. I'm just finally facing forward." And then I walked out, to the sound of a chair tipping over behind me, the sound of control cracking. But leaving that dinner wasn't the end, because my freedom threatened them so much, they chose revenge over love. I thought leaving that dinner would be the last battle, that walking out with my dignity would end their war. But parents like mine don't let go of their power supply without a fight. 2 days later, as I packed for Portland, my phone lit up with a voicemail from an unknown number. A smooth, officious voice said, "This is Jonathan from Hamilton and Company. I'm calling regarding your upcoming interview. We were informed by your references that there are concerns about your reliability." My heart slammed into the back of my ribs. References. Concerns. Someone had poisoned my future before I could even step into it. I called back immediately, voice shaking as I explained everything, my portfolio, my qualifications, the truth. He sounded hesitant but said, "Come anyway. We'll give you a fair chance." I hung up and stared at my silent phone like it was both a weapon and a lifeline. There was only one group who had both motivation and access to sabotage me. My parents weren't afraid I'd fail. They were terrified I'd succeed where they couldn't control me. That night, as I zipped up my suitcase, Brielle called whisper quiet, like she knew her voice had to sneak past walls. "Mom told the company you're unstable," she said. "She said you run away when things get hard." I laughed, humorless and sharp. "Things get hard because they make them that way." She sniffled. "I'm sorry." I didn't stop them. For the first time in forever, I didn't rush to comfort her. "Nothing changes if you stay quiet," I said. And something in her silence told me she finally understood. Before dawn, I ordered a rideshare. As I stepped outside, the porch light flickered, illuminating Sophia standing at the doorway. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, but her voice still carried that poison-laced sweetness. "This is a mistake, Elena. You'll come crawling back." I didn't stop walking. "Watch me not," I said, and slid into the car. At the airport, I watched the sun rise through giant windows, the sky turning into something that looked like freedom. My phone buzzed, one last message, "Dad, don't make choices you can't undo." I typed the reply slowly, "The only thing I'm undoing is your control." Then I deleted the entire thread. Some ties don't need to be cut, they dissolve when you finally grow. When I boarded the plane, my chest felt light for the first time, like the gravity I'd carried for 27 years wasn't mine anymore. As the wheels lifted and the world beneath me shrank, I whispered to the clouds, "Some kids make you proud, huh?" Then I smiled, bright and steady. I'll make myself proud. Because I didn't escape. I evolved. And if you're listening to this thinking you're too small to start over, take up space anyway. You deserve the oxygen.